There we go. We are live. How you doing there, Ronald?
I'm doing well, Terry. Good morning, good day, good afternoon, and good evening to wherever you are listening from. And welcome to this week's studies in Noah at Outreach Noah. Our email address is outreachnoah@gmail.com. So any questions or any communications you would like to have with us, just send it through our email address, please. Well, here we are with our next instalment. Is this going to be any further ones, or will this be the last one in this section on?
Hashem willing, I'll finish chapter 6 that we've been working on for the last 2 weeks. There's not a whole lot left to go. I mean, a little bit, but there's not a whole lot left to go. We're going to pick right back up and conclude this, and then we'll carry back in, our Humish next week. Hashem willing, unless the snow comes and buries us all into this Arctic blast, which I don't think we're going to get anything here. It shifted north.
Oh, that's good
So
for you.
yeah, well, it's funny. They started out we could have a foot of snow, then 5-6 inches of snow, then maybe a dusting, and then as that low pressure that's got the warm air in it down around Florida started shifting north. They were talking about ice, and I don't want ice. And when it ices here, it's bad. It's horrible. Power can be out. You can't go anywhere. You can't do anything. I'd rather have the foot of snow. But I was looking at the weather before I left work today, and they're even calling for here around where I live at. It might get to like 31, 32. So it's going to be right at that freezing line. So we may have some freezing rain, and then back again Sunday and Monday, we're going to be up in the higher temperatures again. So we're just on that line, just between us. It seems like it's weird how Georgia can get a lot of ice. For some reason, the way it comes up out of the wet and the cold comes up out of the Gulf area and the way it meets right here at the Tennessee line where Chattanooga's at, and before you go into North Carolina, it always seems to even follow the state line. It can be either way. So we're just gonna wait and see. Supposed to start turning rough here, I think Friday night and everything. And so we'll wait and see. Just don't want any power outages
No, no.
there with Tennessee.
Our weather's just average. There's the occasional warmish to hot day, and then the rest is just mediocre. Still hasn't really hit the summer heat, but that's more end of the month and into February. But I'm a
See,
bit
that's weird
doubtful
for
this
us to
year.
hear February hot.
Yeah. Okay, I'd
Uh,
like
I,
to
I
say
know
hello to.
my brother out in Oklahoma. I think I seen this morning they're supposed to hit numbers like -15. This cold gust coming through.
Mm, I can have
I
it.
seen that on the Weather Channel today over Oklahoma. I'm like, I didn't get a chance to message my brother see if they changed it out there because it can. They can get a lot of ice and that super cold weather out there where he's at, and they get the real hot, really hot uh, weather that's out there in Oklahoma. That just drought type of heat.
Okay,
Okay, now.
we'll just say hello to Bob, Linda. Good to see you again, Linda, and Veronica in our Zoom room today. If you'd like to come across, the link is there in the Facebook advertisements for this program.
All righty. Ronald, any questions coming in over the last couple of weeks on what we've been covering?
No, nothing so far. I'm a bit surprised.
Especially with last week, because I'm going to begin tonight. I'm going to begin with the last piece that connects last week. We'll just jump right on into here. Again, for those who are just turning in and watching, we've been covering over the last 2 weeks chapter 6 of the book, the Emergence of Ethical Man. And we've been covering is called The Tree of Knowledge and the Emergence of Sin. And last week we covered a really important section about the nature of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was an aesthetic through the senses. Rabbi Soloveitchik showed that through the Eitz Hadat, the tree of knowledge, we get the ethics and the morals, but the way the Tov Ra, or the good and evil, is pictured in the Torah, in the writings, and how it was approached with Adam and Eve, that is through the senses, that it was desirable, it was beautiful, and the good and evil, as Rabbi Soloveitchik pointed out last week, really could be translated and be more appropriate to the setting of the tree of the knowledge of the beautiful and the ugly. And we covered some of that last week. You watch last week's video. But I wanted to end that section on the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and its aesthetic, about beautiful and ugly and pleasurable. He writes, he says, thus we conclude, and this is on that section, the tree awakened lust. Can everybody hear me okay? Because I got this new mic.
Yep.
I'm still getting used to.
Yep, it's fine.
The tree awakened lust was pleasant to the eyes and fascinating in the appearance. Hence, Hadat Tovara, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, corresponds with the aesthetic quality of the beautiful and the ugly, like what I was just saying. He goes on and says, God forbade. Now, this is what God forbade when don't eat of this tree. God forbade man the orgiastic aesthetic experience, the acquisition of the pleasure impulse. That's what the no, do not eat, that tree was all about. He did not want Adam and Eve to take upon themselves the pleasure impulse. He, Adam, was not allowed to overemphasize the moment of wantonness, making the beauty ideal, the fascinating force in human life. And we can look at human history since then, and we can see from one thing after another how much in many societies, past and present, probably future going forward, how much emphasis is on beauty and wantonness, desire, being fascinated with the pleasure impulse. And so that is the essence of the tree of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, is that it awakened the lust, the pleasure impulse in man. And that's what God was forbidding. Rabbi Soloveitchik moves on to the next section called the sin of pleasure as its own end. He said, man ate of the tree and experienced pleasure, not as a secondary phenomena, but it was something else, but as an end of itself. Eve ate of the tree for a single reason: the tree was beautiful. Eve became fascinated, enchanted by the miraculous fruit. All her faculties of resistance melted, and the omnipotent drive of lust overwhelmed and made her sin. Adam and Eve turned into hedonic beings. Pleasure as a motive became the central became central in their lives. Sex love, therefore, became an addiction to hedon. Surrendering to the violent, orgiastic, reckless experience lived through all human passions, feeling their full range and highest tension. The sex urge was sublimated into an aesthetic urge. The yearning for coexistence through a carnal medium found fulfillment in hedonic coexistence of hard, sensuous pleasure and emotional compulsion. The aesthetic aspect was eclipsed entirely. So, surviving the development of man after the original sin incident, we notice that the Torah places specific stress upon the fascination of beauty. As we analyze the above, the general background against which we must observe sin is Hamas, or violence. The act of overreaching myself and reaching out after something that does not belong to me. Also, one of the facts that are facets of what happened with Eve is not only did she take the forbidden fruit, which she was told not to do, but she also committed the sin of theft because it didn't belong to her. He said, all of the trees of the garden is yours, but the one in the middle, don't eat from it. It was his. He set up a boundary in which she crossed and he crossed. They overreaching themselves and reaching out for something that did not belong to them. Invasion of an extensional area that are beyond my sphere of existence constitutes the spring well of sin. Now we're going to go into a passage here that's been misunderstood, mistranslated, misinterpreted more, interpreted more than really as far as mistranslated, but it's been interpreted wrongly by a lot of non-Torah groups. This next passage, Genesis 6, verses 1 and 12, which we'll come back to again once we get back into Rabbi Hirsch's Chumash, says, and it came to pass that when man began to multiply on the face of the earth, the daughters were born unto them, that the B'nai Ha-Elohim, or translated in English, sons of God, saw that the daughters of man, that they were fair, and they took them for wives of all which they chose. Now, those who do not know the Torah and the Torah grammar have misunderstood the sons of, or the B'nai Ha-Elohim, as these were sons of gods, or plural. And they don't understand the word Elohim is used not only for the Creator's name in the first sentence, but also for angels and in men who hold high positions, and judges. Judges are called Elohim. And we're going to see a proper understanding of this passage of what was going on in relation with what was happening when Eve was lusting after the tree and the taking of the fruit, and then this comes about all in context. Rabbi Soloveitchik says, man began to multiply and the division of existential areas came into being. A reality should have led humanity to feel the full pressure of the ethical duty to respect alien property, someone else's property, and rights. that they should respect another person's property and rights. Yet some men here, the B'nai Ha-Elohim, saw that the women, that they were fair and they were attracted by their loveliness. In consequence, they reached out after the forbidden lovely and fascinating women and grabbed them. The ethical motive collided with the orgastic aesthetic one and was defeated. I'm going to read that again. The ethical motive collided with the orgiastic aesthetic one and was defeated. The ethical motive was defeated. The passion in man, aroused by beauty, was too powerful. He yielded to a new force in life, dynamic, hypnotic, and compelling, and stepped over the boundary line of his individual sphere of existence. Whenever the Torah warns Israel against sin, it uses the simile of the aesthetic fascination of la ta'amod, you shall not covet, i.e., be fascinated by hemda, the pleasure, by pleasure which is magnificent. They should not be fascinated by pleasure which is magnificent. Exodus 20:14. That seek not after your own heart and your own eyes, after which you used to go astray. Numbers 15:39. The Hebrew term zenut, which the Torah applies to all kinds of sin, and by the way, that is spelled Zenut, zenut, which the Torah applies to all kind of sin in general, and to sexual and idolatrous indulgences. In particular, refers to the irresistible aesthetic sweep to which man surrenders. He is swayed by the motive which is ecstatic, bacchic, orgiastic, powerful and ruthless, the motive of pleasure frenzy. This unsated hunger and unfulfilled desire for the unlimited hedon, the continuous movement toward the pleasant and the agreeable, is zenut. The continuous movement toward the pleasant and the agreeable is zenut. Jeremiah 3 verse 1. But you have played the harlot, Zanet, Zanit, with many lovers. Ezekiel 16:28. Yea, you have played the harlot with them. Tizanim, Tiznim, Tizanim, yet you could not be satisfied. Their straying, zoneh, the straying heart, which straying me, zoneh means straying, and their eyes which go astray, ha zenot, after their idols. So we see various derivatives of the word zenut and being, played with the harlot. Straying of the heart, straying of the eyes. The lustful glance, which is adultery in itself, the lack of loyalty, an ethical category, betrayal, change of effects, the steady quest for a new source of pleasure, the ingenuity in discovering or inventing artificial stimuli, and unwarranted desires. All of these qualities constitute the excessive hedonic experience. Sensuality unhallowed by ethical appraisal of the Zenut. He goes on and says, to be sure, Zenut as such conveys lasciviousness, and in the sense of idolatrous worship implies another element, that of refined wantonness, the orgy, the Bacchic frenzy, the divine cult, as a service, as only a medium through which man may contact the gods. So he goes on through and he's just talking about several other different cults that's existed throughout the centuries, all being reckless and lewd worship of an orgiastic God who himself is pleasure addict. If you look at a lot of the gods, the way, when the Creator told Israel, don't follow the ways of the heathen, don't learn of their ways and their gods, because the majority of them had something to do with sexual pleasure. The Torah was ruthless in combating this notion of the pagan world. We may say that at this point, Judaism, or the Torah way of life that God gave Israel, revolutionized the human scale of value. Instead of serving God through the ecstatic experience, the Torah commands man to worship him and reveal an ethical dynamism. There is no redemption for man in the esthetic experience. It's a strong statement. There is no redemption of man in the aesthetic or the pleasure experience. On the contrary, quite often it drives him to depravity and lewdness. This is, however, the salvation of the ethical gesture. That's why you see in the Torah, when we talk about Genesis 2:16, when God gave the command, when he says, Va'asav, Hashem Elohim Ha'adam. When God commanded man, it is noted by the sages of Israel that was the beginning of man's moral training. The giving of that command was the beginning of man's moral training. While the pagan world tried to aestheticize the ethical, the Torah is bent on ethicizing the aesthetic. Where the pagan world tried to pleasurize, use words it's easier to use, pleasurize the ethical, the Torah is bent on making, or eclecizing, it's hard to say that with my partial, the aesthetic. It's trying to turn the coin over, per se. Whoever knows a little of the ecstatic worship teeming with wild dancing, thrilling music, extravagant rites, which would take place on festivals dedicated to Adonis, Osiris, Dionysus, and other pagan gods, can appreciate what the Torah understood by Zenut. It is typical of the original sin that the moment of seduction was introduced into the story of the tree of knowledge. Man did not sin because he chose to violate the divine injunction. Adam was seduced by Eve, and she in turn was seduced by the serpent. The human tragedy did not originate by free choice, but by the hypernonic force, the ecstatic experience, the pleasure experience, with all of its compelling power. Therefore, the first sin was perpetrated in the mood of an ecstatic revolt, which was not fomented by free man, but suggested to him by the serpent. The first sin was perpetrated in the mood of the pleasure impulse, the revolt of the pleasure impulse, which was not fomented by a free man, by free choice, but was suggested to him by the serpent. Rabbi Soloveitchik says, how ludicrous the apology of Adam and Eve sounds. The woman who you did give to me, she gave me the tree and I did eat. The serpent seduced me and I did eat. 3:12 and Genesis 3:12 and 3:13. The defense spelled in indictment, the excuse accusation. The sin asserted its precisely. It has seduced me. The sin asserted itself precisely in the word that it seduced me. The serpent has exerted a hypnotic influence over me, awakening the orgiastic hedonic motive in me, which deprives me of the ability to freely choose my ethical power of judgment. Man was swayed by the serpent. The human ethical personality was captivated by the demonic personality. Man and demon confronted each other. They collided and the demon won the battle. The serpent, what are its basic qualities? The esthetic drive, which asserts itself in parasitism. Coexistence, expressing itself strictly in common enjoyment, and hedonic passivity and non-creativity. No longer do I desire the woman and love her, because with her and through her I shall realize my ethical creative aspirations. My longing for coexistence is completely dominated by my pleasure frenzy, which is self-centered, self-warranted, utterly exclusive. Instead of sharing existence with another one on the basis of parity, and the I and the thou equally from the coalition of existence, I unite with the other individual on autocratic premises. The I enslaves the thou. Power is an aesthetic category. In the eternal quest of dominion, man is guided by the hedonic creation, lust for power and lust for pleasure. The yearning for the metaphysical union becomes distorted by the evil aesthetic quality, merger through absorption of the other one. Ronald, anything there?
No, but I'd like to step back to pretty much close to the start and unpack it just a little bit further on the sons of God. The main misconception is that they were angels or fallen angels.
Yeah,
They
they
weren't.
weren't.
They were
men.
They were the ruling class, the judges, the powerful, the rich, who
Yeah, I believe we're going to
felt
see
that
some
they're
of that.
outside the law, like they are today. The rich and powerful think they can
Yeah.
do what they like. They're outside the law, so they were just humans that
Yeah,
were
we're going to
taking
see that in
advantage
this.
of people.
We're going to see that in this next section.
Okay.
Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, speaking of that, Rabbi Soloveitchik is saying that the women were forbidden to these men.
You talking about the B'nai No Elohim?
Yes.
Yeah, because some of them were even wives. I've heard one of my rabbis teach that these were beautiful women who actually were married, and they took them because they wanted them. And we're going to see a little bit of that in this next section called domination as a part of the aesthetic experience, which sometime I'll pull this and we'll go through it because I wanted to finish this. But Alexandra Hudson's book, The Soul of Civility, Timeless Principles to Heal Society and Ourselves, who worked in the government for a while, she's got a whole section on the lust of domination. And it's really interesting. It really coincides quite a bit. When I read this section, I'm like, it reminded me of this section that she has here that talks about the lust of domination and the power that it plays within politics, within work. You know, it's like I told someone one day about a particular job I had. I said, the problem with where I was at was there was rednecks with power, you know, but we're fixing to talk about the domination as part of the aesthetic experience. And it's interesting how through working in the government and she starts out her book actually even talks about the difference, and the book sets up and talks about the difference between politeness and civility. And she talks about how politeness is, for the most part, for a lot of people, is weaponized. And she got into what, the weaponizing of politeness and what it does. And then it was like, it went from that section, the weaponizing of politeness, to the lust of domination. And in society, and whether it be in government, whether it be in relationships, even just some marriages, you'll see one or the other will have a strong lust desire to dominate, to be domineering. And so, as Rabbi Soloveitchik shows here, this is a part of the ecstatic experience, or the pleasure experience. The word's a little easier to say. I'm having a problem with my partial, it's wanting to be dry.
Also, I noticed a couple paragraphs back you mentioned that that all this had awakened this within Adam. That would be prior to him taking the fruit. So this already happened before he took the fruit, and the taking the fruit is not the cause of the problem. It's rather the consequence of the problem.
No, this is when they ate of the fruit and they saw that they were naked and they were ashamed, and then they covered themselves. So it's all of this happened afterwards.
Okay, all right. I thought there was some mention of it awakening the this lust.
It said the hold on. That sentence was. It says that where we started at when we were talking about the tree being the more of the good and the ugly, the pleasure. He said, when ending that one section that we started at the end of last week's session, he says, therefore we conclude that the tree awakened lust was pleasant to the eyes and fascinating in appearance. It was the aesthetic beauty that drew Eve to take and then to give to her husband.
Okay, so it awakened it and then caused them to take.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, because when you read, because she looked at it, it was desirable. To me, when I see the word, when it says it was desire, for eating and all that, to me that word desire, it pictures the word lust. It caused her to lust after the taste of that fruit, to look at the fruit. It was beautiful, so it awakened this lust that was within them. He goes on, enjoyment is synonymous with power. I enjoy it and I dominate and enslave it. The hedonist looks upon the whole world as an object consecrated to a single purpose, to be enjoyed by him. He becomes egocentric, self-loving, and self-adoring. He reaches such proportions that the real object of his wantonness is not so much the sensuous pleasure he derives from the item as the knowledge that this object was dedicated to the comfort and the joy of the selfish self. In other words, the aesthetic experience consists of two elements: pleasure sensation and the exercise of domination over the satisfier. This type of dominion is distinguished by the ruthlessness and insatiability. No barriers are strong enough to stop the aggressive, pleasure-conscious, demonic personality from its daring, aggressive undertaking. It does not recognize any other essential area except its own, and it enjoys its liberation from all restrictions. And we can see that in quite a few of the groups that are roaming around our planet today that do not want to have any form of restriction in their life at all. It violates their rights and their freedoms to be restricted. You can hear that sometimes in some of the things that we hear over the news and other areas. It does not recognize any other essential area except its own, and enjoys liberation from restrictions. This liberation is never identical with the ethical freedom. On the contrary, it represents liberation from the ethical pressures of norm. They want to be liberated from ethics, from morals, which means to surrender to the hypnotic pressure of the aesthetic must. The serpent is both pleasure-starved and dominion-hungry. The serpent is both pleasure-starved and dominion-hungry. Remember, when we was talking about the traits of the serpent, one of the traits and of its character was that he saw God wanted to enslave man for himself, where the serpent come to set him free. You do this, you'll be free. The mere fact that he made an effort to seduce Eve indicates his desire for power, for influencing others and mastering their destiny. He exalts in others' dependence upon his advice and finds pleasure in ruling them. The aesthetic personality is the masterful, dominating personality. Elohim, the creator, for the serpent represents an aesthetic God who created the world in order to enjoy it afterwards. A God who enjoys his creation by enslaving and dominating it. The dynamic God is both powerful and orgiastic, and he wants human beings for the sole purpose of keeping them in bondage and rejoicing in their ignorance and stupidity. This was the view of the serpent, his mindset. The pleasure-loving God is fearful of the competition of man who may find out how to master his own existence. God exercises a vast technical intelligence. Whatever he created is destined to satisfy his desire for power. Therefore, a man, for the sake of his own good, shouldn't revolt. The whole controversy which raged in antiquity and in the Middle Ages about the nature of the original sin, whether it consisted in the discovery of sensuality or in the act of revolting against God, may be satisfactorily resolved. The ecstatic experience as indicated above, is both pleasure awareness and domination exercise. The aesthetic experience, as indicated in what we've been seeing, is both pleasure awareness and a domination exercise. The orgiastic enjoyment is rebellious, anti-authoritarian. The demonic personality wants to play. It matters not with what. It wants to find an outlet in something. It matters not via the medium. It rejects authority. It frowns upon all injunctions. Sound familiar? You listen to any YouTube videos lately? The aesthetic appetite is stimulated by the boundless fantasy. Fantasy lets an enchanting, beautiful mirage arise before a hungry, passionate glance wandering in a yellowish desert sands and weaves a myth of pleasure for a starved soul. The main motive of the hedon is hemdah, desire for something which has not yet been reached and which is beyond the boundary line of legitimate realization. Hemdah drives man to drink the dregs of cup of pleasure and wrings them out. This limitless passion is revolt. If God is powerful and enjoying his existence endlessly, then man attempts to compete with him, to interfere with his design, which man deems detrimental to his aesthetic self-realization. It is peculiar that when Genesis describes the antediluvian deterioration of man in the terms of Hamas, it uses the term Elohim. And we're going to learn a lot about Hamas when we get to the generation of the flood in our learning of Genesis. And we're back to that verse again, Bob. Genesis 6:1-2. And it came to pass, man began to multiply on the face of the earth, and the B'nai Elohim saw that the daughters of man, that they were fair, and they took unto them for wives of all which they chose. And here's where Rabbi Vaychek gets into understanding who these people are. The B'nai Elohim encountered the Binat Ha'adam, the daughters of man. Who were the B'nai Elohim? The sons of privileged few, of the masters of the robber barons, who thought that they were entitled to everything and that no law was applicable to them. Men who practiced violence, Hamas, for the sake of enjoying life. If the woman is fair, attractive, stimulates desire, then why not take her a prisoner and exploit her for the purpose of wantonness and lewdness? All which they chose, the aesthetic choice guided by the aesthetic stimulus, and the sensuous response determined by their actions. B'nai Elohim were typical of the demonic personality of the God concept, which the serpent formulated, a powerful, egotistic, ego-enjoying God. On one hand, there were fair women who stimulated desire, invincible, sex gluttony. And on the other hand, the B'nai Elohim, who were ruthless, reached out after the beautiful women. In his footnote here, on this verse. He says, B'nai Elohim, the sons of princesses and rulers. This is Rashi's view. Rashi's a great commentator and teacher of the Torah of blessed memory. This is Rashi's view, and so it was in Bereshit Rabbah. If so, Scripture relates the judges whose duty it was to administer justice among them openly committed violence, and no one stopped them. When the daughters of men were fair, they would coercively take them as wives for themselves, and spiritually tell of the violence, and mentions further, whomever so they chose, in order to include those women who were married to others. So they took whoever they wanted. Didn't matter. The law didn't pertain to them. So in concluding the chapter, Rabbi Soloveitchik says, it is natural then that the immediate change precipitated by the eating of the forbidden fruit expressed itself in the feelings of sexual shame. Remember, they saw that they were naked and were ashamed. All of this over just these few passages from Genesis 3, 4 through 7. Adam and Eve began to feel embarrassed in exposing their genital organs. Why? Because the sex urge was now distorted by a pleasure desire. Each of the partners began to feel the pressure of guilt and culpability. Eve became the desired lovely person with whom Adam wanted to merge his existence for the sheer delight of possessing her. Sympathetic intimacy is here determined by a sinister longing for dominion and exploitation, for demoting the other individual to the status of slave. Had the sexual love represented ethical solidarity and co-responsibility, the guilt moment would not have appeared at all. Partners would in such a case crave each other in an ethical mood. Equality, reciprocity would be the foundation of the essential union realized through carnal means. Yet man freed himself from the fetters of the ethos and yielded to the esthetic hypnosis. The straightforwardness and simplicity of the urge disappeared. It became carnal and complicated. The partners must stimulate each other, kindle one another's fantasy. The bond lost in permanency and turned into a transient, one-time urge for coexistence. The coexistence is indeed subordination of each other. The longing for it is amoral. The pleasure and the comfort of the partner is irrelevant. My interest comes first. Man began to hide his desire. From it spelled the humiliation of his partner, and he acquired the feelings of shame. That brings that chapter to a close. This chapter was a lot. It was a lot. It opened up to us what the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was, understanding it in its Hebrew and its context with what was being said, what was being done. And it just opened up and showed that once the fruit was eaten, and they were staring at it first, desiring it first, lusting after it first. Then once they took of it, it opened up the pleasure impulse in which the Creator did not want for man to have. And a lot of human society, past and present, there's a lot of dark places that deals with this pleasure impulse. The trafficking of human beings, men, women, and children, the abuse, sexual abuse of all three, being sold as sex slaves. How many stories have we heard over and over and over again of places being found where human traffickers had trafficked people for the use of sex slaves by the B'nai Elohim of our day? The men and women of power, people who lust after domination. That all affects all stages of society, whether you're the wealthiest, kind of like it's what I'm studying, kind of like Marcus Aurelius says, whether you're at the podium. Let me look see how he says that again. It's been a good one I've had on my mind this week. Yeah, he says, whether you're at the podium and in the prison, one on high and one on low, but in either place, your freedom of choice can be maintained if you choose. No, that wasn't Marcus Aurelius. It was Epictetus. And so we whether you're on high or whether you're in low, if you're at the podium, if you're on the prison, you have choice in your life. And a lot of people have chosen to take the dark side, letting the lust of dominionship and the pleasure desires all combined. And some of the worst stories of humanity has been coming out lately. And we all know more about it because of the nature of, knowledge and information travels so fast now. But as we've studied this last, couple of weeks on the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, we really get a good look inside the human design after eating of the fruit. The reason why God said no, don't go there. And it makes sense when he says, the day that you eat, you will die. Because the pleasure impulse leads to death. The dominion impulse to be dominant, overbearing, taking what you want, regardless, it leads to death. What I find interesting out of the statement, though, in Genesis 2:16 and 17, he says, in the day that you eat, he didn't say if you eat. So, Hashem, the creator, in my personal viewpoint, knew that it was going to happen. Because he didn't say, if you eat of that, you will die. He says, in the day you eat. So at some point in time, he just knew that man was going to fall to the lure and to the lust of the beauty and the ugly. But it didn't have to be that way. He didn't desire us to have that. He put that boundary there for a reason. We'll get more into that as we continue on. we're going to see, the boundaries we've been talking about since we, started in Genesis 1:1 just continues to grow. God wants us to live a life of boundaries, and it's for our reason. It's for our life. Boundaries are good for us. Keeps you safe.
Spiritual
Keeps you
death came before the physical death. Taking that path, you can't have a good relationship with the Creator. Running a lifestyle like that.
Yeah, he stepped aside, took what he wanted. He chose the tree over the Creator.
Yeah.
He chose the pleasure, or they did. I'm just going to say he, but he, Adam was responsible. He was given the commandment first. And it was his job to make sure his wife understood. We've talked about that in the past few weeks as well, as we've covered through some of those. All right, Ronald, we finished the chapter. We'll pick back up. Hold on here a second. Grab my. Let's look and see where we're going to be at next week, God willing. All right. This just kind of covered verses 4 through 7. We'll pick up on verse 8.
Okay.
Verse 8 of Genesis chapter 3 next week, God willing.
Very good. Another huge amount taken from a couple of verses.
Yeah, it's a lot to swallow. Probably, those who really want to interested in what it said. I mean, you can get the book; it's really good. Watch our videos last two weeks and this week. Kind of gone through it really quick in a way, because there's a lot there that you can really. Actually, I mean, there's parts of that book I'll read a sentence, maybe a paragraph, and then I have to stop. And absorb and chew and digest before you go on. And actually, Alexandra Hudson's book on the solar civility does the same thing with me. It's really, really interesting. And it's packed. Every paragraph is packed full of good stuff that you just don't want to rush by. Sometimes, the Torah and it's the teachings of the Torah sages and the great teachers of Israel, the way they get in and teach and explain, especially Rabbi Hirsch. I love Rabbi Hirsch. I kind of like it. It's just the thought that came in my mind. I kind of like it going, if you enjoy something like this, going into, a museum, whether it be art. One of my favorites is aircraft museums. You can run through real quick and get a good glimpse at everything, but I'm touchy feely. I want to stop. I want to look. Like my favorite aircraft is the Flying Fortress, B-17 Flying Fortress, and I've got models of it and pictures of it. And finally, a few years ago, I got to actually see one in person at the Mighty Eighth Museum in Savannah, and just put my hand on the prop, there, and like touching it and taking it in. And sometimes the Torah is that way. The Torah is like a museum, not of artifacts, but of so many wonderful things that sometimes you just don't want to read through it so fast. You want to stop and touch and feel and take in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, very much so. You just want to soak it in and absorb it and feel it.
Like here several years ago, we went to a small little air museum while I was waiting going to a meeting, and walked in. Like I said, it was a small one, and lo and behold, sitting right there, this guy that owned it, had it on loan to the museum, was this beautiful, pristine P-51 Mustang, like the Tuskegee boys flew. The thing looked brand new. I walked through the door and my jaw dropped. I told my wife, I said, you go look around. That's where I'm going to go for a little bit. And, just went over and soaked it up. And there are Torah verses that does that for me. I'll be studying for class and I'll read something and Rabbi Herschel opened something up and I'm like, okay, I'm not going to go here. I'm not going to go here. I'm going to stay right here for a few minutes and I'm going to take that in, and enjoy it. Like I said, I hope that's some people see paintings the same way. They can walk up to a painting and hear what it is saying. And those who know art knows what I'm talking about. Anyhow, go ahead, Ronald.
Okay. Well, then I think we can draw it to a close for tonight. And we look forward to seeing you again next week. And as I said earlier, any contact you'd like to make with us, email us at outreachnoah@gmail.com. And everybody have a good rest of the week. And we'll catch up with you next Wednesday night. Thank you.
And next Thursday for y'all on the other side.
Yeah, yes.
The down unders.
Linda and I, yeah.
Yeah, Linda, she's in Tasmania, right? All right.
Okay.
All right, good night and good day.
Okay, Terry. Okay.
All right, bye-bye.
Thanks, Bob, Linda, and hey, I'm forgetting Veronica's name now. How's that? Okay.